There's lots of Old Testament things happening here, but it's good to understand them. So just a very quick recap. So as Naomi arrives back in Bethlehem, she's unrecognisable. She's very sad and bitter, and she blames God. The Almighty has brought me back empty, she said. He has afflicted me and brought misfortune upon me. I do quite a lot with bereaved people, and bitterness and anger are very, very common. It's understandable that she not only lost one, but 3 of her close family. And you can imagine her despair. Who is going to provide for her in the future? It was a society very dependent upon the man working. And she got no men left, had she? And as we know, Ruth had chosen to not go back to her own family in Moab, where they were enemies of Israel actually, but they had different gods as well. But she had chosen to take on the God of Israel and belong to him and to this family. And so she goes with Naomi back to Bethlehem, and they are there. So here we see the third main character, Boaz, come in. He is a relative on Elimelech's husband's side, a man of standing, an honourable man, a man of good character. That's a good thing. So Ruth takes the initiative to support and provide for both herself and her mother-in-law. And she goes, as we saw in the video, to glean in the barley fields. Did you notice that little phrase? It came 3 times. It so happened. And you know, there are things in our life where things so happen. And you think, that is amazing. And here is God, just through the ordinary choices and circumstances of life, arranging things so that this family can be provided for. He does care about the minute details of our lives. Yes, he's the God of the universe. He is the creator and sustainer, but he cares about those who belong to him, just those little individual things. So Ruth goes to glean in the barley fields and works behind, as we were told in the Torah. The gleaners were not to pick all of the fields bare. They had to leave some so that the poor people could follow along behind and pick up what was left over. God's provision for everybody to make sure that nobody went hungry. The gaffer foreman noticed how hard she worked, working steadily from morning except for a short rest. And it so happened that this field belonged to Boaz, who, it so happens, is a relative. And he came to check on the workers. He was the big boss, and he noticed a stranger and asked who she was. Foreman gave a good report of her, and she was invited to stay and have some lunch, to have drinks whenever she wanted, and to stay close to his servant girls as they gleaned behind the other reapers in the field. And a little touch here, Boaz says, I've told the men not to touch you. She was not to be molested in any way. And Ruth says, why have I found such favour in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? And Boaz says, well, I've heard all about you, what you've done. You've left your homeland and come to live with unknown people. And then he has this lovely blessing, which is like a prayer. May the Lord repay you for what you've done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. It's easy to say, God bless you, but I think this had real meaning for Ruth. Boaz really wanted God's blessing and future provision for them. So he makes sure she goes home, Ruth goes home with a generous supply of grain. She not only reaps it, but she winnows it, so she's left with the useful bits. She takes home, and it's about 22 litres full. Must be a huge, big basket or a shawl full. And Naomi is absolutely amazed. Where have you been? What have you done today? What's happened? And Ruth, of course, takes home a doggy bag as well of the food that she's left over from her lunch. Ruth tells Naomi where she's been working, and for Naomi at last there's a gleam of hope, of future provision for them. And she exclaims that Boaz is one of their kinsman redeemers, a possible person, a relative, who according to Old Testament law was instructed to buy back the land belonging to the family and farm it, make it profitable for the widow relatives by providing for them. Naomi knows that he's an honourable man and will act swiftly to put in action the legal proceedings for this to happen. So we have here Ruth, an outstanding woman actually, but she's a stranger, she's a foreigner, she's a refugee, she's an immigrant, she's a woman. In those days, deeply vulnerable, almost second class and dependent on others. But God is not blind to her situation. Through circumstances, she found herself gleaning in a relative's field who could help their situation. She shows her character of loyalty and love to Naomi, and Boaz is a man of integrity. She's embraced the God of Israel as her God. In other words, she has become a believer. By the way, when my eldest son got married to an American girl, she used those words from chapter 1 of Ruth. Your God will be my God. I will go where you go. And she's had to travel. She's now in this country. But she took that on seriously as her marriage vow. And God is working here in this story his purposes through human decisions and circumstances in amazing ways. Jesus said, didn't he, the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second greatest is to love your neighbour as yourself. And here we see this being worked out. Ruth was not one of them. She was a stranger, and yet she was welcomed and provided for. And that reminds me of a verse in the New Testament where God says, Paul says to the Philippians, my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in Christ Jesus. Not want, but need. And then another verse which says, God works all things for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. Sometimes we struggle with the ups and downs and hardships of life, don't we? Why? What's happening? And we take our eyes on and we forget that actually for those who love him, who are called according to his purpose, he does have a bigger picture. He does work things out for our good. No one is outside God's call and scope to save. We have seen what Ruth was, and yet she chose to follow God. He honoured that. And yet, just one final thought. This is a story within a story. This whole book actually pinpoints to the story of Jesus. I don't want to preempt the next two chapters, but just to say that several hundred years later, something happened that relates to this story. And if you read a boring chapter at the beginning of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 1, it's a list full of names. But you'll find the name of Ruth there. And actually you'll find the name of 4 other women who were all notorious, outstanding. But I'm not saying any more. And Boaz here is a type, sort of like Jesus, welcoming the stranger, the outcast and the foreigner, and buying them back from brokenness and hopelessness and sin and mess, and giving them a hope and ultimately a future. So it's a wonderful story, a story within a bigger story, a bigger picture. Can we perhaps have our last song, please?